I watched my sister Maya's manicured fingers drum a silent, impatient rhythm against the polished mahogany. Her nails, the color of dried blood, were the only tell. To the rest of the board, her smile was a portrait of serene confidence, her posture radiating an unearned authority that set my teeth on edge. The air in the conference room was thick, with the familiar scent of expensive coffee and a betrayal so potent I could almost taste it on the back of my tongue. This was it, the moment my life had ended 3 years ago. Maya cleared her throat, a delicate, practiced sound that drew the attention of every person in the room. The other board members, a collection of our father's sycophantic yes-men, turned to her like flowers to the sun. I knew every word she was about to say. I had screamed them into my pillow 1,000 times in the life before this one. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice as smooth and cool as river stones. "I know this is sudden, but recent developments have forced me to reevaluate the direction of this company. While I have the utmost respect for my sister's passion, I believe we are at a point where we need to address certain creative differences." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. But this time, its frantic beat was a war drum. Last time I had trembled, my vision blurring with tears of disbelief. Now, my focus was preternaturally sharp. I saw the faint sheen of sweat on our CFO's brow. I noted the almost imperceptible nod our father's lawyer gave Maya from the end of the table. I had lived this nightmare before, died from it, and now I was its silent, patient orchestrator. "Therefore," Maya continued, her gaze finally landing on me, a flicker of something, pity or perhaps just performance, in her eyes. "It is with a heavy heart that I must motion for a vote of no confidence in our current CEO, Ilara Vance." Her voice, steady as a blade, sliced through the quiet room. The puppets, just as they had before, began to nod in practiced unison. The crushing weight descended upon my chest, the same suffocating pressure that had preceded the screech of tires and the shattering of glass. Except now, it tasted like the opening move of a war I had already won. How would they react when the lamb they expected to slaughter simply smiled at the knife? I let the silence stretch, drawing it out like a taut wire, until the discomfort in the room was palpable. Maya's composure began to fray at the edges, her practiced smile tightening. The board members shifted in their leather chairs, their certainty wavering in the face of my stillness. In my past life, this was when the screaming had started. The accusations, the desperate, pathetic begging. Slowly, I pushed my chair back and stood. My movements were deliberate, unhurried. I smoothed the front of my simple dress, my gaze sweeping over each of their faces before finally landing back on my sister. "I accept your decision," I said, my voice even and clear, devoid of the emotion they had all been anticipating. The shock that rippled through the room was a physical force. Jaws literally slackened. Our father's lawyer, who had been mid-sip from his water glass, choked slightly. Maya's eyes, those brilliant blue pools of ambition, narrowed into suspicious slits. This was not on her script. I was supposed to fight, to make a scene, to validate her narrative of an unstable leader who had to be removed for the good of the company. Without another word, I gathered my laptop and my notebook. My hands were perfectly steady. I slid the laptop into its sleeve, the quiet zip echoing in the cavernous silence. Then, I turned and walked toward the door, each step a measured beat in the funeral march of the woman I used to be. The scent of Maya's expensive, cloying perfume seemed to part before me as I passed her. "Wait!" she called out, her voice cracking, losing its polished edge for the first time. The desperation I had expected to feel in myself was now coloring her tone. "That's it? You're not even going to fight for what's yours?" I paused at the threshold, my back to them all. I could feel their collective stare burning into me. I bit the inside of my cheek, a familiar habit, tasting the sharp, metallic tang of blood. It grounded me. It reminded me of the price I had already paid. I turned my head just enough to look at her over my shoulder. "What's mine?" I said, my voice dropping to a low, resonant promise. "Will always be mine." I walked out without a backward glance, leaving them in a room filled with their victory and a sudden, unnerving question. Had they just won? Or had they just fallen into a trap? 3 blocks from the gleaming glass tower of my former life, a black sedan with tinted windows pulled up to the curb. I slipped into the back seat, the door closing behind me with a soft, expensive thud that sealed off the world of my public failure. In the seat opposite me, Chen Wei, a tech prodigy with eyes that held the same haunted, ancient knowledge as my own, looked up from a bank of glowing screens. He was the only person who knew I had died. He was the only one who believed me when I woke up screaming in a past I thought was gone forever. Phase 1 complete, I whispered, the words feeling like a prayer on my lips. My fingers, now free to move, flew across the screen of an encrypted phone he handed me. I activated a series of dormant accounts, funneled assets through untraceable crypto channels, and set in motion the foundations of an empire Maya would never discover until it was too late. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and neon as we drove, heading not toward my lonely apartment, but toward a nondescript warehouse in the industrial district. This was a hidden laboratory, my real office. It was here that my true invention waited, not the clever AI chatbot Maya had just stolen, a brilliant but ultimately superficial piece of tech I had built as bait. No, my real work, the work that had been my obsession before Maya's first betrayal, was something else entirely. It was a quantum processing architecture that would not just change the market, it would reshape reality itself. Chen's reflection was a pale mask in the window beside my own. His usual frantic energy was subdued, replaced by a tense focus. "Are you certain she'll take the bait?" he asked, his voice low. "The chatbot code is good, but it has flaws, deliberate but discoverable." I leaned my head back against the cool leather, a grim smile touching my lips as I remembered the all-consuming nature of my sister's ambition. I remembered how her greed had blinded her, how it had driven her to steal, to lie, and ultimately, to be an accessory to my death. "She can't help herself," I said softly. "Greed doesn't read the fine print." But even as I said it, a sliver of doubt remained. Was her ambition truly as predictable as I remembered? Or had my death somehow altered the timeline in ways I couldn't yet see? Humiliation was a key part of the strategy. After my public ousting, my parents insisted I move back into my childhood bedroom in their sprawling, sterile mansion. It was a move calculated to showcase my failure, a daily reminder of my fall from grace. They saw it as a penance. I saw it as the perfect command center. Surrounded by the ghosts of my teenage years, I opened my laptop and tuned into the live stream of Maya's first press conference as the new CEO of Innovate AI. She stood at a podium that should have been mine, wearing a stark white dress that screamed visionary. Around her neck, gleaming under the bright lights, was our grandmother's pearl necklace, the one promised to me. The sight sent a familiar bubble of white-hot rage through my throat, but I swallowed it down, channeling the fire into my fingertips. "It's a new era for Innovate AI," Maya announced, her voice resonating with a confidence she had stolen directly from my stolen business plan. She launched into her revolutionary vision, using my presentation, my words, my dreams, without changing so much as a comma. The trap was elegantly simple. The AI chatbot she was now touting as her own was a Trojan horse. It was a brilliant piece of programming, revolutionary even, but I had woven a single fatal flaw into its core architecture. A flaw that only a specific quantum algorithm could exploit. An algorithm that was, at this very moment, being patented under a shell corporation halfway around the world. While the world media fawned over my sister's stolen triumph, I typed a single encrypted message into a secure channel, sending it to a carefully curated network of hidden investors. Investors who knew nothing of Ilara Vance, but everything about the promise of quantum supremacy. "The Phoenix Project is live." The message sent, the trap was set. Through my window, across the manicured lawns and the sleeping city, I could see the blazing lights of Maya's penthouse apartment. She was celebrating her victory. I wondered if, in her moment of triumph, she could feel the faint, deep vibrations of the earthquake I was about to unleash. Sunday dinner at the Lancaster family estate was a weekly ritual of quiet judgment and performative success. The air reeked of roast beef, aged Bordeaux, and my father's profound disappointment in me. He stood at the head of the long, formal dining table, a crystal glass raised high. "A toast," he announced, his voice booming with patriarchal pride. "To Maya, to her visionary leadership and for having the courage to make the hard decisions necessary to protect this family's legacy." My mother, seated to his right, offered me a look of such profound, pitying sadness, it burned worse than any insult. Maya, basking in the stolen glory, simply glowed, her laughter echoing off the ridiculously ornate chandelier as if to mock my silence. I focused on my plate, cutting a piece of potato with surgical precision. "Perhaps this is for the best, Alara," Father continued, his words slicing through me just as they had 3 years ago. "We all have our roles. Some people are meant to follow, not lead. There is no shame in that." Tasting nothing but ash and fury, I took a bite of potato. Maya, emboldened by my silence and our father's praise, reached across the table and squeezed my hand. It was a gesture of false sympathy, a public performance of sisterly concern for the benefit of our parents. Her hand was warm, her grip surprisingly strong. But this time, instead of pulling away, I squeezed back. I leaned forward just enough for my words to be a whisper carried only to her. "Thank you," I said, my voice sweet with poison. "Thank you for showing me exactly who you really are." I held her gaze, and for the first time that evening, the triumphant glow in her eyes wavered. It was replaced by a flicker of confusion, a shadow of unease that rippled across her perfect features. She had expected tears or anger, not gratitude. She had expected a victim. She had no idea she was dining with her executioner. Her smile faltered, and in that moment I knew she had finally realized that the game had changed. But did she have any inkling of the rules I was now playing by? Maya strutted onto the main stage at TechCrunch Disrupt like she owned it. In a way, she did. She wore the Armani suit I had spent a month's salary on, the one I had saved for my own keynote. The confidence she projected was a physical force, radiating off her in waves that washed over the 3,000 investors, journalists, and tech acolytes packed into the auditorium. This audience, this moment, it was all stolen property. I watched from the shadows of the back row, a ghost at my own coronation, my pulse as steady as a metronome. The irony was so thick, so sweet, I could have bottled it. She had no idea the code she was about to demonstrate was a digital time bomb programmed to self-destruct at precisely 3:47 p.m., the exact moment of my death in the previous timeline. My phone buzzed silently in my pocket. A message from Chen. "Phoenix servers are hot. Launching on our mark." He was in a van a block away, our real product queued up and ready to launch on the dark web. Were the people who truly mattered, the ones who dealt in power, not just hype, would see it first. Maya was playing for the crowd, but I was playing for the world. Her fingers, usually so steady, trembled almost imperceptibly as she typed the activation code into the presentation laptop. Hairline cracks were beginning to show in her porcelain composure. Behind her, the massive 40-foot screen flickered to life, displaying the elegant, intuitive AI interface that had cost me everything. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice a clarion call across the silent, expectant hall. "Prepare to witness the future of human-computer interaction." For a full 90 seconds, it was flawless. The AI responded beautifully, answering complex queries, generating elegant prose, and composing music on the fly. Hope, bright and beautiful, bloomed in Maya's eyes. It was the most exquisitely painful thing I had ever seen. Then, at 3:47 p.m., it happened. The interface froze. A single line of red error code appeared, then another and another, until the entire screen cascaded into a waterfall of digital gibberish. A collective gasp, sharp and sudden, sucked the air from the room. I remained motionless as every drop of color drained from my sister's face under the harsh, unforgiving stage lights, while Maya stammered, offering flustered excuses about Wi-Fi interference and beta testing bugs. I slipped out through a service exit. Chen was waiting, the side door of a nondescript panel van sliding open to reveal a mobile command center humming with silent power. "Showtime," he said, his face illuminated by the glow of 3 different keyboards. My fingers flew, a blur of motion as I initiated the counter launch. With a series of keystrokes, I pushed our quantum processor demo live, uploaded our patent applications to a dozen international databases, and activated a multi-pronged media blitz targeting the most influential tech journalists and venture capital bloggers on the planet. The taste of victory was sharper, more electric than I had remembered. It was like lightning striking the same place twice. Within minutes, the first stories hit the web. Mystery startup Phoenix Quantum reveals breakthrough technology during TechCrunch chaos. Another read, is Innovate AI's bot built on stolen, unstable code? I could practically feel the shockwave of Maya's panic radiating across the city as her stolen thunder became the perfect storm for my arrival. Her epic failure had just become my flawless coming out party. The frantic phone calls started at 4:15 p.m. I let my burner phone ring 4 times before answering, savoring the shrill, hysterical pitch of her number on the screen. "What did you do?" she shrieked, her voice stripped of all its practiced smoothness. I held the phone away from my ear, picturing her pacing her penthouse, the Armani suit feeling less like armor and more like a straitjacket. "I have no idea what you're talking about, sister dear," I replied, my voice pure honey. Through the window of my new Spartan studio apartment, my chosen command center, I could see the first news vans pulling up outside her office building. On my laptop, a live stream showed her mortified, frozen expression from the stage, playing on a humiliating loop. "You planned this," she hissed, the accusation laced with a dawning, horrified respect. "You wanted me to fail." I smiled, a real smile this time. Finally, she was beginning to understand. But did she grasp the scale of the game we were truly playing? She appeared at my door just after midnight. The designer dress she wore was wrinkled, her perfect makeup streaked with tears that looked genuine enough to fool anyone who hadn't died by her hand. She didn't knock, she just fell against the door when I opened it, collapsing onto my cheap sofa in a heap of Chanel and desperation. Her sobs echoed off the bare walls of my small temporary home. I didn't comfort her. I walked to the kitchenette and poured 2 glasses of cheap red wine, my hands perfectly steady. "I made a mistake," she whispered, her voice breaking on every syllable. "I thought I could handle it, but I'm drowning, Alara. I'm drowning." The familiar scent of her perfume, now mingled with the sour tang of fear, filled the space between us. For a heartbeat, a flicker of the old sisterly bond, the ghost of an old love stirred in my chest. But then I remembered. I remembered the sickening crunch of metal, the spider web of cracks spreading across a windshield, and the taste of my own blood in my mouth as I died, knowing she had let it happen. I pushed a glass of wine into her trembling hand. Her eyes, red-rimmed and pleading, searched mine for a lifeline. But what would she see there behind my carefully constructed mask? Pity, or the cold, hard reflection of her own ruin? 3 weeks later, Maya had managed to claw her way back from the brink. The public humiliation had been brutal, but our father's money and influence had stitched a thin veil of credibility back over her reputation. I watched from a cafe window across the street as she practiced her pitch in a frosted glass conference room, her hands gesturing with a frantic energy that betrayed the cool facade. Her target was Harrison Blackwood, the venture capitalist kingmaker who had turned startups into pantheons. Securing a meeting with him was a coup, a testament to her relentless, desperate ambition. What she didn't know was that Harrison and I had been playing chess in his private club every Thursday for the past 6 months. He appreciated my game, but he was fascinated by my technology. The crisp autumn wind swirled dying leaves around the cafe's patio, carrying the scent of coming storms. I took a sip of my black coffee and sent a text to Chen. Initiate Phase 2. My reflection in the cafe glass was a stranger's, calm, calculating, and utterly devoid of the naive girl who had once trusted her sister with everything. I wondered if Maya would recognize the woman I had become. Harrison Blackwood's office was a throne room overlooking the city, its floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting Maya's nervous energy back at her. I could almost taste her anticipation from my position in his outer office, pretending to be the next appointment. It tasted metallic and sharp, like she'd been sucking on copper pennies. I knew from Harrison that her presentation was a reskinned version of my own, the chatbot's code patched up but still fundamentally flawed. Fascinating, Harrison murmured after her pitch, his face an unreadable mask of professional interest. Maya's eyes gleamed with a premature triumph that was painful to watch. He promised her an answer within 48 hours, and I knew she was already mentally spending the $50 million he would never, ever give her. I watched her practically skip to the elevator, a lamb celebrating a private tour of the slaughterhouse. Did she feel a single shred of guilt for the intellectual property she was peddling as her own? The moment the elevator doors closed, Harrison's receptionist waved me in. The inner office smelled of expensive leather and old money. He bypassed his desk and went straight to a crystal decanter, pouring 2 glasses of scotch. His professional mask was gone, replaced by the cool, predatory expression of a shark who smelled blood in the water. "Your sister's presentation was impressive," he said, swirling the amber liquid. "Too bad it's completely stolen." A laugh escaped my throat, darker than I'd intended, heavy with the weight of a death and a resurrection he couldn't possibly comprehend. "She's persistent," I allowed. We spent the next 2 hours structuring a deal that would make Maya's $50 million fantasy look like pocket change. $2 billion for a 60% stake in Phoenix Quantum. When we signed the contracts, the scratch of the pen on the thick paper felt like I was signing my sister's death warrant. Every stroke was a nail in her coffin. For maximum impact, we timed the press release to the minute. The announcement of Harrison Blackwood's historic $2 billion investment in the mysterious Phoenix Quantum hit the news wires at the exact moment Maya began her most important board meeting since the TechCrunch disaster. I watched the live stream from my new corner office, a space Harrison had insisted I take immediately, sipping a coffee that tasted like liquid lightning. On the screen, I saw the notification pop up on the board members' phones and tablets. I watched their faces shift from polite attention to confusion, then to outright horror as the implications sunk in. Their CEO had built their entire recovery plan on a foundation of lies, pitching stolen, worthless code, while the real genius behind it was closing the biggest deal of the year. The emergency session dragged on for 6 agonizing hours. I could practically smell the fear and betrayal seeping through the video feed. When the vote finally came through, a unanimous decision to remove her as CEO, effective immediately, I raised my coffee cup in a silent toast to the woman who had taught me that family loyalty was just another weapon. This time, there was no pleading. Maya stormed into the lobby of my new building like a hurricane given human form, her heels clicking against the marble floors with the rhythm of machine gun fire. I had left instructions with security to let her through. I wanted to see her fury up close, to taste the desperation on the air. She burst into my office, her face a contorted mask of rage, her perfect composure finally shattered into a million pieces. "You poisonous bitch," she snarled, her voice raw. The afternoon sun streamed through the vast windows, catching the tears of pure hatred in her eyes and turning them into glittering diamonds. "You planned this, all of it, from the very beginning." I leaned back in my new leather executive chair, feeling it conform to my spine, a perfect fit. I gave her the coldest, sweetest smile I could muster. "I learned from the best," I said. Rage had failed her. So that evening, she tried charm. She arrived at my office door holding a bouquet of white lilies and an expensive bottle of wine. Her approach shifted from fury to calculated contrition. She had changed into the soft blue dress I'd always complimented, her hair styled to look innocent and vulnerable. The lilies filled my office with the cloying scent of funeral homes and false promises. "We're sisters, Alara," she whispered, her hands trembling just enough as she set the wine on my desk. "We should be partners, not enemies." I accepted her peace offering with a smile that never reached my eyes, my mind already working, already calculating how I would twist this desperate, pathetic overture into the blade for my next cut. She thought she was offering an olive branch, but I saw it for what it was, the perfect weapon to use against her. The following Sunday dinner was not a meal, it was a war council. Maya, having failed with both rage and charm, had retreated to her most powerful alliance: our parents. We sat in father's study, the air thick with the scent of his expensive cigars and my impending excommunication. He paced before the cold fireplace, lecturing me about sibling loyalty and family responsibility, his words echoing the hollow pronouncements he'd made his entire life. Mother sat on the Chesterfield sofa, her tears perfectly timed, each one landing like a tiny guilt-laced bomb designed to breach my defenses. She spoke of our family's reputation, of the shame I was bringing upon them, of how I was destroying my sister's career. I sat in the very same leather wingback chair where, in my previous life, father had effectively disowned me after my startup failed. The bitter irony tasted like rust in my mouth. "Give Maya another chance," father finally demanded, his voice low and dangerous, carrying the unspoken threat of total disinheritance. "Merge your resources. Make this right, Ilara." I agreed to meet Maya at Chez Laurent, the very restaurant where we had celebrated the launch of my first company a lifetime ago. The scent of truffle oil and stale betrayal hung in the air as she laid out her grand proposal. Her plan was audacious. I would merge Phoenix Quantum with a new shell company she'd created, Synergy Solutions. We would be co-founders, equal partners. We would rebuild our relationship, our family's legacy together. Her manicured fingers drummed against the crisp white tablecloth, the same nervous tell that had always given her away. I let her talk, nodding at all the right moments, feigning consideration as she painted a beautiful picture of our shared future. All the while, I was mentally calculating the trajectory of her downfall, using her own greed as the fuel. I let her believe she was convincing me that her desperate gambit was working. How could she ever suspect that her olive branch was the exact weapon I needed to spring my final trap? Synergy Solutions launched with a press conference and a champagne reception. Our father stood proudly beside Maya as she cut the ceremonial ribbon on her new headquarters, her smile so bright it could have powered the building's lights. She had a board stacked with his oldest business associates and a generous seed round funded by his cronies. I watched a clip of the event on my phone, a ghost observing from across the city. What Maya, our father, and their entire network didn't know was that for the past 6 months, Chen and I had been quietly acquiring the global intellectual property rights to every single piece of technology she planned to develop. Her entire business model was built on a foundation of patents that now belong to me. Chen, watching the news feed over my shoulder in our lab, had a look on his face that mirrored my own, a volatile mix of grim anticipation and dread. My phone buzzed. It was a confirmation from our legal team in Zurich. The final patent transfer was complete. Maya's entire company was now legally a criminal enterprise. 6 months was all it took. 6 months for Maya to hire 200 employees, burn through millions in capital, and project over $100 million in revenue. All of it built on technology she couldn't legally use. I chose my moment carefully. On the morning of her quarterly earnings call, I walked into her boardroom. I wasn't alone. I was flanked by my lead attorneys, their leather briefcases filled with enough legal firepower to annihilate a small nation. The scent of fear in the room was instantaneous and overwhelming, a thick, cloying smog. Maya's face cycled through a rapid series of emotions: confusion at my presence, recognition of my lead counsel, and then a dawning, pure terror as I placed a thick stack of patent documents on her gleaming conference table. "You have 48 hours to comply with our cease and desist order," my lawyer announced, his voice a calm, surgical instrument. "After which we will be suing for damages and filing for a full injunction against all operations." While her own lawyers scrambled, their faces ashen, I caught Maya's eye across the long table. I didn't need to say a word. My expression said it all. Checkmate. The business press descended like vultures on a fresh kill. Sister versus sister, the patent war that's destroying a tech dynasty. Synergy Solutions built on a lie? Maya's frantic attempts at damage control were disastrous, each public statement digging her hole deeper, revealing a shocking level of incompetence and willful ignorance. She looked cornered, desperate. I gave exactly one carefully worded statement to Forbes. "Family taught me that blood is not thicker than business ethics." The market's response was swift and brutal. Phoenix Quantum's valuation soared past $4 billion. Synergy Solutions stock crashed to pennies, becoming virtually worthless overnight. From my penthouse window, I could see a permanent camp of news vans and reporters outside Maya's apartment building. A media siege engine waiting for her final, inevitable surrender. She came at 3 in the morning, soaked from a merciless driving rain, shaking with a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. She had lost weight. The designer clothes that had once been her armor now hung loose on a frame that seemed to have shrunk. She looked like a refugee, stripped of her pride, her status, her future. "Please," she whispered, the words scraping out of her throat like broken glass as she stood dripping on my marble entryway. "I'll give you everything. Just don't destroy me completely." The scent of her desperation, mingled with rain and regret, filled my apartment. It was the moment I had been working toward, the ultimate victory. And for a fleeting, treacherous second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I closed my eyes, and the memory returned, sharp and vivid. The taste of my own blood, the sound of metal-crushing dreams, and the cold, hard fact of her betrayal. I looked at the broken woman before me. What mercy could she possibly expect from a ghost? The call from Harrison Blackwood came during what my lawyers assured me was Maya's final ruinous board meeting. His voice was different, stripped of its usual smooth confidence, replaced by a tight curiosity that prickled my skin. "We need to talk about your identity, Alara. My office, now." When I arrived, the atmosphere in his downtown penthouse office had changed. The air, usually calm and smelling of leather and success, was charged with a tense, static electricity. He didn't offer me a drink. He just stood by the vast window, a silhouette against the sprawling city. "Phoenix Quantum's technology is paradigm shifting," he began slowly, turning to face me. "But your financial backing? It's a ghost. I've had my best people trying to trace it for weeks. It's impossible. It's a multi-billion-dollar firewall. Who is really funding you?" This was the moment I had been waiting for, the pivot upon which the entire game would turn. I took a slow breath, savoring it. "My funding comes from my trust," I said calmly. "And my name isn't really Alara Vance. It's Emma Lancaster." Harrison's face remained a perfect poker mask, but his eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "As in Lancaster Aerospace?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I gave him a small, grim smile. The final secret was out. The truth spilled out of me, a story I had held captive for my entire life. I was the sole heir to the Lancaster Aerospace fortune, a $50 billion empire built on cutting-edge aviation technology. My real parents, Thomas and Evelyn Lancaster, had died in the crash of an experimental jet when I was 3. My care and my fortune had been entrusted to a board of trustees who, in their infinite wisdom, decided I needed to grow up normal. I was given a new identity, adopted by the Vances, a respectable upper-middle-class family, and my inheritance was hidden away, a secret to be revealed on my 30th birthday. The irony was so thick, it was almost suffocating. Maya had spent her entire life consumed with envy, desperately clawing for a fortune that was a mere rounding error compared to mine. The Vances had raised me as their lesser daughter, their charity case, never knowing they were housing one of the wealthiest women in the world. Harrison sank into one of his leather chairs, the scotch he finally poured for himself trembling in his hand. "Jesus Christ," he breathed, his mind visibly racing, recalculating every conversation, every move, every single interaction we'd ever had. "You weren't playing chess with me. You were playing with the whole board." "There's more," I said, leading him from his office down to my private vehicle. We drove in silence to the warehouse, the true heart of Phoenix Quantum. Deep beneath the city, in a laboratory shielded by layers of concrete and steel, I finally showed him my true work. It wasn't just the faster processors, it was applied quantum manipulation. I led him to the central containment field, a sphere of shimmering, emerald green light. The air itself seemed to hum and vibrate around it. "This isn't just about computing, Harrison. It's about reality. With a few commands on a terminal, I targeted a simple block of titanium on a pedestal inside the field. The green light intensified, and the solid block of metal dissolved into a shimmering cloud of particles, then reformed, its molecular structure completely rewritten into pure, flawless gold. Harrison stared, his breath hitched in his throat. This. This isn't just revolutionary, he whispered, his voice filled with a reverence that bordered on fear. This is impossible. This is God level technology. I smiled, remembering how dying had taught me that impossible was just a word for something you hadn't figured out yet. The question was, what does a man who can rewrite reality do with a petty family squabble? While I was downtown revealing my secrets, Maya's desperation finally pushed her over the edge. Consumed by a frantic need to find some piece of leverage, some dirt she could use to save herself, she broke into my Spartan studio apartment. She didn't find blackmail material. She found a locked box in my closet. Inside was not evidence of my crimes, but evidence of my life. My original birth certificate bearing the name Emma Lancaster. Faded photographs of a smiling couple standing in front of a jet. Thomas and Evelyn Lancaster. And a single, recently updated bank statement from my trust, showing a balance with so many commas it looked like a string of decorative beads. When I arrived home, I found her sitting on the floor of my living room, the documents spread around her like the wreckage of a plane crash. Her face was a canvas of pure devastation. It wasn't the look of a rival who had lost. It was the look of someone whose entire reality had just been obliterated. The game she thought she was playing, the family she thought she knew, the sister she thought she'd beaten, it had all been a lie. Who are you? She whispered, the words barely audible, her eyes wide with the terror of a child who has just seen the monster under the bed is real. The final family dinner was a masterpiece of tension. I called the meeting at the Vance estate. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply laid my original birth certificate on the center of the polished dining room table. Father's face went ashen, his cigar falling from his slack jaw. The business empire he had spent his life building, the legacy he prized above all else, was suddenly revealed to be a child's toy collection. Mother's tears, for the first time I could remember, were painfully real. She was mourning not just the daughter she had mistreated, but the colossal fortune she never knew had been living under her roof. And Maya sat silent as a statue, a ghost at the feast. I explained it all with cold, calm precision. How I had let them believe I was their project, their failure, their victim, all while holding a power they couldn't even comprehend. The crystal chandelier above us seemed to dim, as if the very air in the room was being compressed by the dramatic, irreversible shift in the balance of power. They stared at me, their adopted daughter, their broken bird, and finally saw me for what I was, the phoenix that had been hiding in their gilded cage all along. What do you say to the person whose life you tried to ruin when you find out she could have bought and sold you 1,000 times over? Father's office had never felt smaller. The room, once a symbol of his unassailable power, now felt like a cage, the mahogany walls closing in on them. The scent of desperation hung in the air, a cloying, sour smell that overpowered the familiar notes of old leather and his expensive cigars. My entire adoptive family was gathered, their collective pride shattered into a million pieces. Father, a man whose voice had once boomed with authority, stood by his desk looking shrunken and frail. Mother's sobs, no longer performative, were the soundtrack to their humiliation. But the centerpiece of the pathetic tableau was Maya. She was on her knees, actually kneeling on the antique Persian rug, her designer dress pooling around her like spilled silk. She looked up at me, her face stripped bare of its usual artifice, leaving only a raw, pleading terror. "We'll give you everything," Father promised, his voice cracking on the final word. He gestured vaguely around the room at the empire he had built, now revealed as a house of cards. "The company, what's left of it, the house, all of it, our name, just make this stop." They were offering me their entire world, not understanding that I already owned it, and 1,000 others besides. I looked at their broken faces, at the ruins of the family who had cast me out. All I could taste was the faint metallic memory of my own death. Later that night, Maya came to my penthouse alone. She must have used the service elevator to bypass the lobby security. She looked even smaller without the backdrop of our parents' desperate hope. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow as she stood in my sprawling living room, the city lights glittering below us like a galaxy I had conquered. She didn't have flowers or wine this time. She came with the last vestiges of her identity. She offered me everything she had left: the remaining shares in our father's company, the deed to her apartment, even the key to a safe deposit box containing the jewelry she'd inherited from our grandmother. The pieces she had once lorded over me. "I know I destroyed you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant city hum. "I was jealous, I was weak, and I was cruel. There's no excuse. But please, Alara, don't erase me." The autumn wind howled softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows, carrying the scent of coming winter, and I realized with a strange sense of detachment how profoundly tired I was. The rage that had fueled me for so long had burned down to cold, hard embers, but tired didn't mean forgiving, and forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. I walked to the bar and poured 2 glasses of wine, the same vintage she had brought to my apartment to celebrate stealing my first company. A lifetime ago. I handed one to her. We stood in silence for a long moment, the city stretching out below us like a circuit board of dreams and broken promises. She watched me, her breath held, waiting for a verdict. "No," I said finally. The word was quiet. It wasn't a shout of triumph or a hiss of anger. It was a simple, solid fact, falling into the space between us like a stone into a deep, still well. I watched Maya's face crumple. It wasn't with rage this time or even surprise. It was with a genuine, soul-deep grief. She wasn't just mourning her lost fortune. She was mourning the sister she'd never bothered to know and had now lost forever. "I can't undo what you did," I continued, my voice as steady as bedrock, as I explained it to her not as a sister, but as a transaction. "And I won't pretend it doesn't matter." I laid it all out, each word measured and precise. I told her that the betrayals, the lies, the theft, her complicity in the events that led to my death, they were choices, not mistakes. They were choices she had made, again and again. "You didn't just steal my company, Maya," I said, my gaze fixed on the endless city lights reflecting in her tear-filled eyes. "You stole my ability to believe in family. You took something from me that no amount of money can ever buy back. You can't give me back the person I was before I learned what you were capable of." I finished speaking and the silence that followed was absolute. She understood. Finally, completely, she understood. She nodded once, a small, jerky movement of utter defeat. She placed her untouched glass of wine on the marble countertop and walked out of my apartment, out of my life, without another word. The soft click of the door closing behind her was the most final sound I had ever heard. 2 years later, I stood on the polished teak deck of my private research yacht, the Phoenix, watching the sunrise paint the Mediterranean a dozen shades of liquid gold. The salt breeze carried the scent of freedom, tinged with jasmine from the distant Italian coast and the clean, metallic taste of morning mist. Phoenix Quantum had grown into a $6 billion empire, but its value wasn't measured in currency. Our quantum processors were revolutionizing everything from medicine to space travel, solving problems that had plagued humanity for centuries. Chen joined me at the railing, his hair whipping in the wind. He looked younger, the haunted expression finally gone from his eyes. He handed me a tablet displaying a complex molecular model. "The simulations are conclusive," he said, his voice filled with a quiet awe. "We can now target and neutralize cancer cells with 100% accuracy, with 0 side effects. The quantum healing project is viable." He looked from the tablet to my face. "Any regrets?" he asked, the question hanging in the quiet morning air. I looked out at the endless horizon, at the birth of a new day, and I realized with a profound and peaceful certainty that the answer was no. My technology was healing the world in ways I had only dreamed of. From our primary research facility nestled in the Swiss Alps, I watched as quantum computers modeled climate change solutions with startling accuracy as medical breakthroughs once deemed impossible became routine, and as our deep space probes, powered by quantum drives, sent back images from the edge of the solar system. The irony was never lost on me. Maya's betrayal, an act of petty, destructive greed, had been the catalyst for all of it. It had forced me to unleash my true potential, to build something worthy of the impossible second chance I had been given. The coffee I sipped in my minimalist office tasted like liquid lightning, charged with the same impossible energy that powered my machines. An encrypted message from the Nobel Committee sat unanswered on my desk. I had already decided to decline. Some victories were worth more than public recognition. The work was the reward. Maya's letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, a physical piece of paper that felt like an artifact from another era. It had been forwarded through a chain of 7 different law firms, a complex dance designed to protect both of our privacies. Her handwriting had changed. It was no longer the arrogant, slanted script I remembered, but something steadier, more careful. As if she had finally learned to weigh the cost of every word. In concise, unadorned prose, she explained that she had used the last of her resources to start a foundation for victims of corporate fraud. She spent her days helping people navigate the treacherous legal and emotional waters of the very betrayals she had once perpetrated. It was her penance. The irony tasted bittersweet on my tongue. She had found her redemption in the ruins of her ambition, while I had found my freedom by accepting the price of mine. I read the letter once, then walked to the fireplace in my office and burned it. Not with anger, but with a sense of finality. I let the smoke carry her words, and the last ghost of our shared past, into the clean, cold, alpine air. 5 years after my resurrection, I sat on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean near my home in Big Sur. The sun was setting, bleeding orange and purple across a sky that seemed to stretch into infinity. The ocean reflected the light, a shimmering blanket of gold, the same color that had welcomed me back from the darkness of death. The quiet, almost imperceptible hum of my company's quantum network was a constant, comforting presence in the background, a global symphony of processors healing, building, and creating the future I had once died trying to achieve. The salt air filled my lungs with the clean scent of possibility, and for the first time since my rebirth, I felt not just alive, but wholly, completely at peace. As the first star appeared in the darkening sky, I made a silent wish. May everyone get the second chance they deserve, and the wisdom to use it well. My autobiography would never be published. Some stories were too impossible for the world to believe, too painful to fully share. But the legacy wasn't in a book. It was in the quantum laboratories around the world, where young, brilliant scientists worked with technology born from betrayal and reborn through a relentless determination. It was in the lives saved, the planet healed, the boundaries of human knowledge pushed ever outward. The taste of victory, once so sharp and metallic, had mellowed over the years, becoming less about the bitter satisfaction of revenge and more about the quiet, profound sweetness of a purpose fulfilled. Occasionally, Maya's name would appear in a charity newsletter, a brief mention of her foundation's steady, quiet work. Proof that even the most broken people could choose to rebuild. I closed my laptop, the sunset's afterglow painting the horizon. I stepped onto my balcony, breathing in the cool night air of a world I had helped to mend, finally at peace with myself, and with the heavy price I had paid for power.